They stood across the room, your absence louder than any words they threw at you. The silence was a mirror showing every moment you bent, every apology you offered without being asked, every time you sacrificed your pride for someone else's comfort. In that quiet, you felt exposed. A pattern of yielding, replaying itself until it hardened your spine with numbness rather than strength. You recognized that moment, the one where you looked at your own reflection and realized you'd become someone they could walk over without a second thought. You remember the sting of betrayal when loyalty became leverage, how their indifference cut deeper than any insult. That flicker of power you once had when your gaze alone could challenge a room was buried under years of acquiescence. And now, as you trace the jagged edges of that loss, you sense something shifting. The part of you that begged for their approval is dying, and from its ashes, another self emerges, still, unbroken, unteachable by their petty rules. This is not about healing what's broken. There is no balm for scars born of disrespect. This is about forging your own gravity, so intense they hesitate before encroaching. Each time you refused to justify your worth, they questioned theirs. Each time you held your silence, you sharpened your presence. And in that space between your heartbeat and your breath, you find a force they can neither predict nor control. You've chased validation like a moth to a flame, only to learn that light belongs to someone who refuses to burn for others. Tonight, you stop chasing. Tonight, you become the person they fear losing. If you've ever felt the weight of their indifference, if you're done with emotional chaos and ready to see who you really are, subscribe and let the silence speak. They watched you shrink into every conversation, apologizing for thoughts unspoken, for emotions too loud, for being anything other than agreeable. In their eyes, you were water, take any shape, but never faultless, never solid enough to withstand pressure. You learned to vanish at the first sign of conflict, to smile through the fracture, to nod when your spine begged you to stand. But tonight, you feel the tremor beneath your skin, the tremor of a threshold cracking. Remember the last time they spat? I thought you were different, like a curse. You recoiled, heart throttled, tongue ready to beg forgiveness. Instead, you tasted iron and thought, they didn't apologize because they were sorry. They apologized because you didn't react. In that instant, you ceased to be prey. You became a question they couldn't answer. What happens if I don't bend? Their voices rose with condescension, punctuated by your silence. Every word they unleashed became a monument to your restraint. They gasped for control, but the silence swallowed them whole. You felt their grip loosen, conviction wavering, and in the aftermath of their confusion, you sensed an unnameable power humming beneath your ribs. This is the crucible where respect is forged, not when you perform strength, but when you embody absence. They searched your face for fear, for desperation, for a flicker of the old you begging for reprieve. Found nothing. That vacuum you created was more fearsome than any outburst. You recall the night their laughter echoed in your chest. You had made a mistake trivial in hindsight, but they used it as ammunition, a reminder that you were dispensable. The scar throbbed for days, a pulsing reminder of every time you apologized for living. Then one evening, you caught your reflection in a cracked window pane. The man staring back didn't flinch at his own eyes. No shame. No shame at having been wrong. Only a cold clarity. Mistakes are human. Regret is optional. They trembled because you refused to kneel. When you stopped defending yourself, they began doubting themselves. They wondered who you were without their permission. Each hesitant glance revealed their terror. If you could survive without their validation, what else could you survive? What boundaries would you redraw? What alliances would you shatter? You remember the ache of being called ruthless, an accusation hurled to wound you. but you recognized the truth hidden in their insult. They called you cold because they couldn't control you anymore. Coldness is not cruelty. It is precision. It is restraint. It is the still point around which chaos spirals and breaks apart. Tonight, as you sit in the flicker of streetlight through Venetian blinds, you embrace that stillness. You let your breath anchor you to what's real. Your worth is not a service rendered. Your silence is not weakness. Your absence is not abandonment. It is the ultimate leverage. They will test you again. They will poke at your edges with mockery, with pity, with passive threats. They will try to awaken the old you, the one who believed their respect was earned through submission. But there is no return. The moment you realized that if you have to say you're valuable, you're not, you shattered the mirror they held to you. Power is not the volume of your voice. It is the gravity of your presence. True power lives in the spaces you refuse to fill, in the conversations you refuse to attend, in the apologies you refuse to offer. Feel the tension coil in your chest. That is your new pulse. They will hesitate when they once charged. They will stutter when they once dictated. They will weigh every word, every move, against the unknown force you've become. And in their hesitation lies your dominion. Hold this moment. Let it burn. Let their uncertainty echo in your bones. Do not relight the old patterns. You are not water. You are the vessel. If you've ever tasted that fear in their eyes when you simply refuse to react, comment below and share the silence that changed you. The weight of their unspoken questions presses against your chest. Who are you when you don't apologize? What happens when you refuse to explain? They search for the familiar tremor in your voice, that implicit confession of doubt. They hunger for it. But you've learned that the most devastating answer is a steady gaze and clipped words. You think back to the showdown at the bar, when the alpha of the group cornered you beneath neon glare. His laughter echoed like gunfire. You felt the old self recoil, ready to deflate under the barrage, yet your lips parted only once, so low it barely registered. Try harder. In that instant, the room tilted. His smug grin faltered, replaced by the kind of confusion that seeds dread. You didn't ask permission to exist. You didn't seek his approval. You simply took your space, and he realized you would not cede it. That night, as you stepped into the rain, the cold droplets were not punishment, but baptism. You washed away the residue of expectation, the residue of every time you had shrunk. Now, each raindrop played a rhythm against your skin, a metronome marking the birth of someone they cannot define. They will call you detached. They will whisper it behind your back, as though it's an insult. But detachment is the scalpel that cuts through manipulation. It is the blade that slices the strings they've wound around your heart. Each time they lash out in frustration, you feel instead a subtle tightening in your core, a sign that their power is unraveling. Recall the aftermath of the argument that ended your longest friendship. You walked away without a backward glance, leaving his voice echoing down the hallway. You don't care anymore. He pronounced it like a verdict, but you knew the truth. You cared so little that your silence became an accusation. You stopped reacting, and that terrified him more than any outburst. In the weeks that followed, you watched him navigate crowds, seeking you in every glass reflection, every corner. He needed to know you were reachable, still malleable. When he couldn't find you, panic rippled across his face, and you felt a dark satisfaction hunger for the moment when they realize you are not theirs to command. You felt the surge of power when you turn away from their pity, when their "Are you okay?" trembles with feigned concern. You let them fill the silence. You let them drown in their own worry, while you stand back, untouched. They try to break that facade, throw barbs about your indifference, but you hold your posture. You nod once, almost imperceptibly, like the conductor guiding their panic-stricken orchestra. They've mistaken rage for strength. They think volume and spectacle will reclaim you. Let them be wrong. Let them believe that in order to matter, you must perform. Meanwhile, you cultivate a presence that needs no announcement. You learn to occupy space without intrusion, to influence without intervention. Picture the moment they sought to shame you at the dinner table loud enough for the room to hear your failure. You met their gaze with measured calm. You let the accusation hang, unchallenged, like a noose with no knot. And as they realized you would not struggle, the noose loosened and fell away. Their fury turned inward, and you felt the quiet swell of dominion. Each time you refused the bait, each time you extinguished their accusations with a slow blink, you carved deeper into the bedrock of your presence. In the abyss between their words and your reaction, you forge a new authority, one that trembles nothing, craves nothing, but demands everything. They will test you with false crises, with manufactured emergencies. They will beckon with guilt, with nostalgia, with the promise of belonging. If only you relent. Do not answer. Let the trap spring shut behind you while they grasp at empty air. You stand now at a precipice. Behind you is the desire for their understanding. In front of you lies the uncharted territory of your own gravity. This is the battlefield they cannot ever invade, because it exists only within you. No concession, no admission, no weakness, only the slow, deliberate crafting of presence so complete that even your absence becomes unbearable. You felt the fracture when they stopped, expecting you to fight back. It was subtle, an almost imperceptible hesitation in their tone. The way their words stumbled before finding purchase. They realized that the old strategy, undermine, provoke, wait for you to flinch, no longer worked. They scanned your face for that flicker of panic, craving the fuel to light their assault, and found only stillness. That stillness is your weapon. It lives in the moment when their insult hangs heavy in the air, and you allow it to dissipate without comment. You've learned that any reaction, even a breath, hands them control. So you draw wires of silence around yourself, each strand reinforced by restraint. In the echo of your quiet, they hear only their own doubts. Think back to the moment she accused you of indifference with lips curled, as if pity were an insult. She expected an apology or a defense. Instead, you offered a slow nod, measured and unhurried, as though considering whether her words even mattered. Her face crumpled. You saw it then. The realization that you judged her accusation more worthy of analysis than rebuttal. You held her gaze, unmoved, and she recoiled. In that recoil lies your unspoken decree. You will not be commanded. You will not be explained. You will not be owned. You exist in a domain beyond their ordinates of discourse. Their attempts to cage you with gossip, with rumor, with half-truths, collapse against the barrier you've built around your presence. You recall the phone call that ended at 3 a.m, her voice tremulous, begging for reassurance after her latest drama. You let the line go silent. The hours passed. When she called again, frantic, you answered with the same calm. "I'm here." That two-word statement held more weight than any promise you'd ever uttered. It said, "I listen on my terms. I care on my terms. All else is negotiable." Power isn't in generosity. It's in the decision to bestow it, and the choice to withhold. Each moment you refuse to overextend yourself, you tilt the power scales. Each boundary you draw floods your spine with a cold conviction, one they cannot cross without your consent. You've been called heartless for maintaining that barrier. But heartlessness is not cruelty. It is preservation. It is the iron rule that says, "I will not bleed on demand." They believed your wounds were public property. They thought your empathy was currency to be spent at their whim. and they spent until the reserves ran dry. Now you ration what little you share. Imagine their fury when they demand explanation and receive only cryptic calm. They fling fragments of their disappointment, hoping to shatter your reserve. But your reserve is a fortress. Their disappointment ricochets off its walls and returns to them, heavier and colder than before. In that atmosphere of deflected energy, you cultivate an aura they cannot infiltrate. They poke and prod, but the hush around you absorbs their force. They feel as though they're shouting into an abyss, and that realization is more unsettling than any confession you could make. You know the taste of that power now. Metallic, potent. It courses through your veins when you let them overreach, then silently withdraw all engagement. The void you create blooms into their deepest fear, being rendered irrelevant. Tonight, as the moon slices your shadow across the pavement, feel how solid you've become. Let your reflection in every window remind you that you are a presence to be measured, not a puzzle to be solved. They tested you with absence, believing that silence would fracture your resolve. When they stopped returning your calls, you felt the needle of panic in your veins, until you tasted the calm beneath it. In the hollow of unanswered questions, you discovered that you could exist apart from their narrative. Their absence was not emptiness, but confirmation. You would not orbit their moods any longer. In that void, you cultivated a magnetic pull, drawing their attention not through frantic gestures, but through the gravity of your stillness. They tried to provoke you over text, baiting you with provocations meant to ignite a storm. Instead, you watched the screen glow under your finger, thumbs hovering, then retreating. You refused to convert their fury into your reaction. And in that refusal, their words lost their venom, echoing back as impotent whispers. They confronted you at the gathering an orchestrated ambush beneath flickering lights and forced smiles. Their eyes darted, hunting for the old cracks in your armor. A false compliment slipped from their lips, heavy with expectation. You would deflect, defend, perhaps even beg permission to reclaim your dignity. But you met their gaze with a measured tilt of your head, as if pondering their audacity. The compliment froze mid-air. They recoiled, realizing you judged their intentions before their words. That moment was a crucible. Respect arrived, not as a gift, but as a demand. It arose from the precise calibration of your presence, conveyed through a steady posture, an unhurried breath, an unspoken awareness that you were neither desperate nor naive. They sensed the barbed wire beneath your composure and faltered. You didn't grant respect. You extracted it by embodying your own standards. You recall the afternoon when she flung accusations like stones, each one a reminder of your supposed failures. She expected you to catch them, to shield yourself, to mend each fracture with apology. Instead, you let the stones clatter to the floor, unheeded, uncollected. Her hands went empty. She stared at the ruins of her own tirade, stunned to find no target. In the wake of her silence, you felt the pulse of unclaimed power, a rhythm they could neither trace nor tame. It was there, in the aftermath of her collapse, that you understood leverage is born in the space between offense and reaction. They arc their flames at you, hoping to elicit smoke. You stand unburned, and the fire devours itself. Each spark they ignite turns inward, scorching their own assumptions. And you watch, coolly, as their strategy fractures under the weight of your indifference. They attempted one final gambit, an appeal to shared history, a promise of regained camaraderie if only you would forgive. The nostalgia hung like a velvet trap. You traced the edges of their plea with your gaze, then let it slip through your fingers as though it were ash. Their voice cracked a whisper of desperation. They realized too late that memory without presence is a ghost. You would not haunt their past. You claimed the present as your dominion. Now, As the night deepens and the city hums beyond your window, you sit in the stillness you've earned. Every test they launch meets the same unshakable calm. They will war through doubts, through guilt, through pity, yet you remain the axis around which their chaos spins and collapses. You have become the person they fear losing, because your absence is the sharpest blade you wield. They cornered you one last time beneath the harsh fluorescence of the office hallway, where reflectors magnify every shadow. Their questions came sharp and swift. Why won't you explain? Don't you care about the team? Are you even listening? Each syllable a blade seeking flesh. You let the hum of the lights fill the gaps between their demands. In that hum, you found rhythm, and you answered nothing but a slow exhale. They bristled at your calm, as though silence were a rebuke. Their voices climbed in pitch, cracking with the panic of an audience discovering the star they believed indispensable has walked off stage. You watched their frenzy bloom and fade, petals of panic curling inward, until only emptiness remained. You stepped past them, shoulders level, spine unwavered, an exit without apology, unaccompanied by explanation. That exit became your manifesto. They replayed it in every meeting thereafter, dissecting the rarity of your restraint. They drafted excuses for your behavior, stress, apathy, detachment. None asked the question you'd already answered. Whose life are you living? Not theirs. Later, you gathered fragments of their theories like broken glass, sharp, worthless without context. In the evening hush of your apartment, you arranged those shards on the windowsill behind dinner's flicker. Accusations of neglect, rumors of disloyalty, whispers of betrayal. You stared at them until the night air chilled their edges, and then you swept them away with a single, unhurried hand. Not because you forgave them, but because you'd moved past their expectations. You felt the weight of that final liberation. It is not joy. It is not relief. It is the recognition that the chains you feared were always illusions manufactured by those who needed you to remain pliable. Now, each footfall you take reverberates with authority. Each breath you draw confirms you are no longer tethered to their whims. Recall the last time someone dared to claim your absence would doom a project, a friendship, a family dinner. You let that claim hover heavy as an indictment, but you refused to defend your worth. You had become the gravity they couldn't flee. In the stillness of unbroken silence, they found the crack in their own foundations. This is the apex of your transformation. No concessions left to make. No reactions left to elicit. You occupy a dimension where presence is sovereign and absence is weapon. Their fear of losing you has become your fortress. They cannot dismantle what they cannot define. Hold tight to that truth. Each time they test your limits, answer with the unspoken. Each time they seek to provoke you, let the hush around you speak their defeat. Every refusal to perform is an affirmation of your dominion. When you stand before the mirror tonight, look past the face marred by their doubts. See the silhouette they cannot contain. Feel the charge in your veins, the quiet storm they refuse to forecast. You are the person they fear losing because you have forsaken their power over you. And now, they wait in the shadows of your calm, desperate for any spark. Give them none.